Right now, somewhere, a 10-year-old is hunched over a desk at 8 p.m., solving for X. Their eyes are tired, their legs are restless. Outside, it's dark, and they'd rather be anywhere else. This is what childhood learning looks like for most of the world in 2026, an average of 218 hours of homework a year for a U.S. middle schooler, according to a 2023 study out of the University of Phoenix's College of Education. Sit, repeat, memorize, test. Here's the disruption. For roughly 300,000 years of Homo sapiens history, none of that existed. No worksheets, no desks, no dates to memorize before a Friday quiz. And yet, by age 10, a child in a hunter-gatherer society could track a wounded animal for 12 miles, identify over 200 edible plants, and build a shelter that would survive a night at freezing temperatures. No teacher stood over them with a red pen. No one assigned it as homework. This isn't a story about ancient people being simpler. It's the opposite. It's about to change how you think about what learning is actually for, and why the version we've built for the last 150 years might be working against the very brain it's trying to educate. Start with the Kalahari Desert, Southern Africa, 1968. Anthropologist Richard Lee spent over a year living among the Jew/Hwanzi, a sand hunter-gatherer people, tracking exactly how their children spent their days. His data, later expanded by researchers in the 1970s, showed something startling. Children under 12 spent almost no time in structured instruction. Instead, they spent an estimated 6 to 8 hours a day in unsupervised, self-directed play, often mimicking adult tasks like digging for roots or building tiny huts. By adolescence, without a single classroom, these children could identify more plant and animal species than most American college biology majors. Anthropologist Barry Hewlett, who spent decades studying the aka people of Central Africa starting in the 1970s, documented something even more precise. AKA children as young as 8 could safely use a machete, start a fire, and navigate dense rainforest alone. Skills acquired entirely through watching and imitating, never through formal teaching. But here's where it gets stranger. When researchers looked closer at Aka and Jew Hwanzi children, they found almost no direct instruction at all. Hewlett's data showed that less than 5% of children's skill acquisition moments involved an adult actively teaching. The rest came from something else entirely: observation, imitation, and play. What psychologist Peter Gray, in his 2009 research at Boston College, called the hunter-gatherer model of education. Gray spent years compiling ethnographic records from over a dozen foraging societies and found a consistent pattern. Children were rarely told what to do. They were simply present, near the fire, near the hunt, near the tool-making, absorbing skills nobody explicitly assigned. And crucially, they weren't graded. There was no failing. That absence of failure changes something in the brain. In 2011, a study published in the journal Frontiers in Psychology measured cortisol, the body's primary stress hormone, in children during self-directed play versus structured, evaluated tasks. Cortisol spiked by as much as 40% higher during tasks framed as tests, even when the actual difficulty was identical. The brain, it turns out, doesn't just respond to what you're learning. It responds to whether you feel judged while learning it. Hunter-gatherer childhood was almost entirely free of that judgment. Modern schooling is built on almost nothing else. That's not the whole story. Rewind further to Prussia, 1763. King Frederick the Great introduced the Volksschulen, the first mass compulsory schooling system in Europe, designed explicitly to produce obedient soldiers and factory workers, not curious thinkers. Historian Alexander Rustow described its purpose bluntly: to teach punctuality, silence, and unquestioning obedience to authority. Rows of desks, bells marking time, standardized instruction, one teacher speaking, dozens of children listening in silence. In 1930, anthropologist Margaret Mead observed something similar on the other side of the world, in Samoa. Adolescents there moved fluidly between households, learning fishing, weaving, and childcare from whichever adult happened to be nearby that day. No fixed curriculum, no single teacher, no exams. Mead's conclusions were later disputed by researcher Derek Freeman in 1983, but the surrounding data from other Pacific societies held up. Skill transfer without formal testing was the norm across dozens of documented cultures, not the exception. So if humans learned this way for 300,000 years and only shifted to desks and homework around 1763, a span of time so small it barely registers on our evolutionary timeline, why does it still feel normal? Why does a 10-year-old today accept 218 hours of homework a year as simply what childhood is? Because by 1918, compulsory schooling was law in every US state. 2 centuries. That's all it took to make an evolutionary anomaly feel like human nature. 2 centuries to convince an entire species that learning requires a desk, a deadline, and a grade. When for 1,500 centuries before that, it required none of them. In 2019, a study led by psychologist Peter Gray is tracked a sharp rise in anxiety and depression among American children between 1955 and 2016, alongside a corresponding decline in unsupervised free play. He wasn't the only one to notice the correlation. Play, in his data, wasn't a break from learning. In hunter-gatherer societies, it was the entire mechanism. So the next time you sit down to memorize something for a test, or watch a child do the same, consider what's actually happening, not a natural process being executed correctly. A 250-year-old factory system running on a 300,000-year-old brain that was built for something else entirely, to learn by watching the fire, not by fearing the red pen.